You don't need to fight in a war to profit from one. You just need your phone and basic logic. Sun Tzu said in his famous Art of War, "War is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin for the state, making it a subject that cannot be neglected." And thousands of years later, that idea is still alive. This treaty is still studied today by businessmen, governments and militaries. In this video, we won't analyze how wealthy businessmen profit from war. Instead, we'll look at how ordinary people manage to make money from it and at what cost. But first, we need to understand why wars are fought and why they have been throughout history. Because in reality, not much has changed since the Sun Tzu era. States still commit unspeakable atrocities in the name of survival. But what if I told you that, very often, this survival has nothing to do with freedom, nothing to do with democracy, and nothing to do with saving oppressed people? What if the real reason is much simpler? Resources, because access to resources is survival for a state. Oil, trade routes, rare earths, strategic metals, these are not just commodities, they are the foundation of an economy. And when your entire economy depends on those resources, losing access to them becomes a matter of life and death for the state itself. So when countries that control those resources are ruled by so-called terror regimes and they refuse to sell to you, or worse, they sell to your enemies instead, then suddenly it becomes a survival of the state scenario. And in those moments, morality becomes optional, no matter who was in charge throughout history. The British, the Spanish, the French, the Americans, Israel, and many others. The goal of every imperial or colonial entity has always been the same: obtain more resources. Whether it was Native American gold, African resources, oil in Iraq, Kuwait, Libya. History keeps changing costumes, but the script stays the same. Resources are the base of every economy, and states treat them as a matter of life and death. The problem is, you can't sell that to the public. You can't just go on television and say, "We need oil, so let's overthrow Maduro and bomb Iran." No, you have to be more subtle than that. You need better marketing. You need words like regime change, liberation, human rights, oppressed people, threat to democracy. And then you build a clean-looking justification, a respectable excuse, a casus belli, a reason that sounds noble enough for the public, while the real objective stays hidden underneath. Now, this video is not about how wars are started, but understanding why wars are started is a fundamental part of understanding how people profit from them. Because war is not just destruction. War is also a business, and maybe the most awful business on earth. Let's make one thing clear: getting rich from war means getting rich from death. Very often the death of innocent civilians. Families, children, entire populations displaced and destroyed. So obviously, this is not something we can ever encourage. But the truth is, a lot of entities in this world do not care about morality. They think in one language only: money. And that is where the real story begins. Because military complexes are not necessarily fully nationalized entities. A lot of them are private companies. And the goal of every private company is simple: profit. And very often, all that profit is reflected on the stock market. Which means that in today's world, you could literally open your investing app, buy shares in companies that build the tools of war, and profit from war yourself. That's the dark reality of the system. Let's take one very clear example so you understand exactly how this works. Lockheed Martin, the world's largest defense contractor, an American company that dominates global aerospace and security markets. In simple words, they sell military equipment, fighter jets, missiles, defense systems, space systems, the kind of tools that suddenly become very valuable when the world starts burning. And that means that when conflicts escalate, companies like Lockheed Martin become some of the biggest winners. Now here's where it gets extremely dark. Before the recent aggression of the US and Israel on Iran, Lockheed Martin's stock price was trading around 440 USD on December 1st, 2025. And by the time of this video, it trades around 640 USD. That is an increase of about 200 USD, or about 37% in 6 months. In other words, If you had invested months earlier, you would have made a massive return simply by owning shares in a company whose business grows when war expands. But the real question is not just what stock went up. The real question is why? Because this video is not just about naming a stock. It's about understanding how to identify which businesses can profit from future wars, despite the horrifying reality behind them. So let's go back to Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is famous for manufacturing the F-series fighter planes, like the F-35, as well as missiles and space systems. And a lot of the technology they produce becomes essential during modern conflict. Which means what? It means that when Iran launches a drone that may cost only around $20,000 to produce, the US and Israel may have to respond using advanced interceptor systems that can cost millions per missile. That is the insanity of modern warfare. One side launches cheaply, the other side intercepts expensively. And that is a goldmine for defense contractors, because every cheap drone launched by the so-called enemy can trigger the use of extremely expensive Western-made defense systems. Now add another layer. These missile systems are not produced in unlimited quantities. Lockheed Martin only makes a limited number. And those systems have to be shared among multiple US allies. So in simple terms, there aren't enough missiles for everyone. And when stockpiles start running low during a real conflict, governments panic. That is when they call the manufacturers and say, produce more, faster, whatever it costs. And when each missile can cost millions, and your customer is the United States government or one of its closest allies, and that customer is involved in an ongoing war or military escalation, then you are in one of the best business positions imaginable. You can produce more, and they will buy more, because in wartime, demand is not optional. It is urgent, and that is exactly how war turns into revenue. Revenue turns into profit. Profit turns into stronger earnings. Stronger earnings mean more security for shareholders, more dividends, more confidence in future contracts. And all of that pushes the stock price higher, which means that if you invested early enough, war could technically make you richer. And now you understand one of the biggest mechanisms behind getting rich during wars. Of course, this can become much more complex than that. There are oil companies, private military contractors, logistics firms, cybersecurity companies, energy traders, commodity players, reconstruction businesses. There are entire industries that thrive when the world becomes unstable. But defense contractors are one of the clearest and darkest examples, because they are directly connected to the machinery of destruction. And now we need to go back to the most important part of this whole discussion: humanity. Because yes, you may get rich using these techniques. You may make a lot of money. You may find the right business, the right contract, the right geopolitical event, the right stock, and the right timing. But at what cost? Thousands, if not millions, of deaths, mass displacement, destroyed cities, broken families, innocent civilians becoming the biggest victims of games they never chose to play. That is what sits underneath the profits. So don't get it twisted. If you invest in these companies, your money is helping finance the creation of tools designed to kill. And yes, people will always try to frame it differently. They will say it is defense, they will say it is strategy, they will say it is necessary, they will say it is complicated, they will say it is for survival of the state. But death on civilian populations, no matter how we justify it, no matter how we frame it, is always wrong. Always. So think twice. Because yes, you can buy shares in some of the most evil businesses on earth. And yes, money can buy a lot of things. Comfort, luxury, status, freedom, influence. But there are two things money will never buy you: morality and a conscience.